Lena Kessler didn't expect her morning to start with a crumpled envelope stuffed with what looked like tens of thousands of dollars. She found it behind the counter of Brew and Rise, the tiny coffee shop she worked at 6 days a week. It had been wedged under a stool near the back corner, right where the last customer from last night had sat, the guy in the black suit with the unreadable face, and the Rolex that didn't match the rest of the laid-back crowd. Her fingers trembled as she peeled the flap back. Inside were thick stacks of $100 bills. No note, no name, just cash. She stared at it like it might explode. "Lena, you okay?" her manager called from the kitchen, popping a tray of muffins into the oven. "Yeah," Lena said quickly, tucking the envelope under the counter. "Just spilled some sugar." Once her shift ended, Lena walked straight to the nearest precinct to turn it in. The officer nodded, scribbled a report, and told her if no one came to claim it in 90 days, it'd be hers. She left her contact info and walked out, still rattled. 3 days later, a man walked into Brew and Rise, and Lena's stomach dropped. He was tall, sharply dressed in another dark suit, his jawline sharp enough to cut glass. His eyes scanned the cafe before landing straight on her. "Hi," he said, voice low and steady. "You were working last Thursday night," Lena nodded. "Yeah, I was. Can I help you?" "I think I left something here," he said. "An envelope," she blinked. "Full of cash." A faint crease formed between his brows. "Yes," her heart pounded. "I turned it into the police. I didn't want." "I mean, there was no name, no ID. I didn't know who it belonged to." The man's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Thank you for doing the right thing. Most wouldn't." There was something oddly sincere in the way he said it, like he didn't expect people to be decent. "I'm Lena," she offered, unsure what else to say. "Sterling Callahan," he replied, reaching out. His handshake was firm, warm. "I owe you," she shook her head. "You don't owe me anything. It wasn't mine." Sterling's gaze held hers for a long second. "Still. You could have walked away with a lot of money. Most people would have." "I'm not most people. I've noticed." He paused as if debating something, then added, "Let me take you to dinner, as a thank you." Lena blinked. "Dinner?" He smiled, actually smiled, and it did something strange to her chest. "You did the right thing. Let me do something right too." She hesitated, then gave a small nod. "Okay, one dinner." She expected a neighborhood restaurant, something low-key. Instead, he picked her up 2 nights later in a sleek black car with a driver, and they pulled up to a rooftop restaurant with candles flickering across white linen tables and a view of the whole city. "Sterling," she whispered as the server poured champagne into a crystal flute, "this place is I can't afford this." "You're not paying," he said simply. "Relax, enjoy it. I feel like I'm in a movie." He looked at her across the table. "So do I." They talked through appetizers about books, travel, her dream of opening her own cafe someday. He didn't talk much about himself, but he listened intently, asked thoughtful questions, and laughed at all the right moments. By dessert, her cheeks hurt from smiling. Outside, he walked her to the car and opened the door for her. Before she climbed in, she turned to him. "Thank you," she said. This was way too much, but also kind of perfect. Sterling's eyes never left her. "You're welcome, Lena." He didn't kiss her. He didn't even touch her. But something electric passed between them in that moment, and she felt it all the way home. The next morning, she found a small white box waiting at the register when she opened Brew and Rise. Inside was a delicate gold necklace with a tiny coffee cup charm. No note. Just a receipt from a high-end jeweler with his name on it. Sterling couldn't stop thinking about her. He'd had dinner with models, actresses, heiresses. None of them had looked at him the way Lena did, like she didn't care about his money, like she actually saw him. He didn't tell her who he really was. Not yet. He didn't want to scare her off. But the truth was, Sterling Callahan wasn't just the man who lost an envelope of cash. He was the CEO of Callahan Enterprises, a global tech conglomerate worth billions. And she'd returned what could have been a fortune to her. He hadn't expected to find someone like Lena in a tiny cafe in the East Village. But now that he had, he couldn't stop himself from wanting more. He showed up again that weekend, no suit, just jeans and a sweater. He ordered a cappuccino and sat at the back reading a book, She noticed immediately. "You came back." "I like the coffee," he said, but his eyes told the truth. He was there for her. She served him with a smile that made his chest tight. "We have a loyalty card, you know." "I think I'm already loyal." She blushed and walked off, and he watched her like she was the only thing in the room. Over the next 2 weeks, he kept coming back. Sometimes he brought her pastries from other cafes around the city. Sometimes he just sat and listened to her talk during her break. He didn't make a move. He didn't push, he just showed up. Until one night, as she was locking up, he waited outside. "Come with me," he said, holding out his hand. She hesitated. "Where? I want to show you something." She stared at him, then slowly reached for his hand. They drove in silence, the city lights blurring past the window. When they pulled up outside a private art gallery closed to the public, her mouth parted. "Sterling." "How? I know the owner," he said simply. "Come on." Inside, the lights were dim, soft music playing through hidden speakers. The entire space was empty except for them. He led her to the center, where a single painting hung on the wall. It was of a woman behind a cafe counter, sunlight hitting her face. She stared at it, stunned. "Is that me?" He nodded. "I had it painted." "Why?" He looked at her, his voice quiet. "Because I don't forget the moment everything changed." For a second, the world stood still. And then Lena did something she hadn't planned. She kissed him. Right there, in the middle of the empty gallery, with her heart pounding. She leaned in and kissed the man who'd walked into her life with an envelope full of money and turned everything upside down. And Sterling kissed her back like he'd been waiting his whole life for that moment. Rain tapped softly against the window panes of Lena's apartment, the city outside muted under a gray sky. She hadn't heard from Sterling since that night in the gallery. Not a call, not a visit. 2 days had passed, and every time the bell over the cafe door jingled, her stomach flipped with hope only to settle again when it wasn't him. She didn't understand it. That kiss had felt seismic, like something irreversible had been set in motion. But maybe it had been a moment for him, nothing more. A spark, brief and unimportant, the way it probably was with women like her, ones without designer heels or black cars idling at the curb. She was wiping down the espresso machine, trying not to overthink, when a man stepped inside wearing an earpiece and a tailored charcoal coat. He didn't order anything. He scanned the room once, then approached her. "Miss Kessler?" he asked. She nodded, uneasy. "I've been asked to escort you," he said, glancing at a sleek watch. "Mr. Callahan would appreciate your presence." Her heart stuttered. "Sterling sent you?" "Yes, ma'am." He said it was important. She hesitated for only a second before grabbing her jacket and telling the assistant manager she'd be gone for the afternoon. The man led her to a black SUV parked outside, and within minutes, they were weaving through traffic, heading uptown. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. Her thoughts were a storm of curiosity, nerves, and something warmer she didn't dare name. The vehicle rolled to a stop in front of a building she didn't recognize, a towering structure of glass and steel, all clean lines and silent security guards. She was ushered inside, through an elevator that opened directly into a vast penthouse. The first thing she noticed was the view, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city like a living painting. The second was the silence. No staff, no music, just him. Sterling stood near the window, a phone in one hand, a glass of something pale in the other. He ended the call as she stepped in. "You came," he said without turning. "I didn't know I had a choice," she replied, her voice quieter than she intended. He turned then, and she caught something in his expression she hadn't seen before: uncertainty. Not nervousness, not regret, just a hesitation, like he wasn't sure what version of himself to be. "I wanted to explain," he said. "About why I disappeared." "You didn't owe me anything, Sterling," she said. "It was just a kiss. I'm not expecting I am." He cut her off, stepping closer. "I'm expecting everything." She blinked, caught off guard. "I had to think," he continued. "I've spent years keeping people at arm's length, women especially. I've never brought one here, ever." She looked around. "Here meaning this penthouse," he nodded. "This life." She stepped toward him slowly. Why now? Because you didn't ask for any of it, he said. You didn't try to charm me. You didn't care about what I had or didn't have. And when you found something that could have changed your life, you gave it back. Her voice was barely audible. I didn't think it would lead to this. Neither did I. She crossed to the window, staring out at the city far below. You live in a different world, Sterling. I can't pretend I fit in here. I don't want you to pretend, he said. I want you to be exactly who you are. She turned to face him. You still haven't told me what you do. He hesitated, then reached into a cabinet beneath the bar and pulled out a slim portfolio. He handed it to her without a word. Inside were newspaper clippings, profiles, business awards. Photos of him shaking hands with world leaders, launching tech initiatives, speaking at conferences. Her eyes widened as she read headline after headline. You're the Sterling Callahan. I was hoping I could just be Sterling to you. She dropped the folder onto the marble countertop. That envelope, it was just pocket change to you, wasn't it? It wasn't about the money, he said quietly. It was about who you were when no one was watching. She stepped back, a dozen questions fighting to be asked, but one came out first. Is all this place, that car, the gallery, was it just your way of proving you could impress me? No, it was my way of showing you who I am and hoping you'd still want me anyway. She stared at him for a long moment, then exhaled. You're not what I expected. Neither are you. He moved toward her, slower this time, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed, but she didn't move away. I didn't kiss you because of what you had, she said. I kissed you because I felt something I couldn't explain. But I don't know if I can step into your world, Sterling. It's too big, too watched. He reached for her hand, warm and steady. Then let me step into yours. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The city moved behind the glass, unaware. What are you even doing this afternoon in a penthouse with a girl from a coffee shop? She asked, a note of disbelief in her voice. He smiled faintly. I canceled a board meeting. They'll survive. I make minimum wage. You make the best coffee I've ever had. She laughed once, unguarded. You're ridiculous. He tilted his head. You're breathtaking when you laugh. Her breath caught in her throat, and for a suspended second, she felt the ground shift under her feet again. Come with me, he said. I want to show you something else. She narrowed her eyes. Is it another painting of me? No, it's something better. He led her through a hallway she hadn't noticed before, past a quiet office, into a room lined with bookshelves and tall windows. In the center was a drafting table covered in sketches, blueprints, floor plans, and a name she recognized scrawled along the top. Brew and Rise, she whispered. He nodded. I bought the building last week. She spun toward him. What? You told me you wanted to own your own cafe someday. I want to help make that happen. You bought the building. I want you to have control. We'll renovate it. You'll design everything. No strings, Lena, just an investment in someone I believe in. She stared at him like he'd lost his mind. You don't even know if I'm capable. I've seen how you treat people. I've seen how you work, and I know what it means to you. That's enough for me. She took a step back, overwhelmed. I can't accept that. You don't have to, not yet, but I'll keep showing up, Lena, with or without the money. I just need you to know that I'm serious. Her voice was quiet. This feels like a dream I'm going to wake up from. Then let me be the reason you don't. The rain had stopped. The clouds had pulled back and the light over the city turned gold. And for the first time in a long time, Lena wasn't sure which way was up. She only knew she wasn't ready to walk away. Not yet. Lena didn't sleep that night. Her mind was too full, her body too wired, and her heart too unsure of what to do with all the new possibilities that had suddenly jumped into her orbit. By morning, she was standing outside the cafe before sunrise, keys clutched in her hand, staring up at the place she'd worked in for the last 3 years. The building didn't look any different, but she knew now that it belonged to Sterling. That he had quietly purchased it with the intent of giving it to her, not loan, not rent, not lease. Give. She unlocked the door and stepped inside, the familiar scent of roasted beans and wood polish grounding her feet to the floor. She moved through the motions of opening, checking inventory, prepping the machines, stacking cups, but her thoughts kept circling back to him. By the time the rush hit mid-morning, she was knee-deep in orders. A couple of regulars chatted by the counter, and a delivery guy struggled with a stack of boxes at the door. She was halfway through pouring a latte when she saw him, not Sterling. A woman, tall, angular, and dressed in a sharply cut white coat that looked custom-made. Her heels clicked as she approached the counter, her eyes sweeping the cafe with a look that said she didn't approve of any of it. "Are you Lena Kessler?" she asked. Lena blinked, finishing the order and handing it off before nodding. "Yes, can I help you?" "I'm Ava Langford." Sterling's business partner. Lena felt her stomach tighten. "Okay, I'd like a moment of your time, privately." She gestured toward the back hallway, and Lena followed, confused and mildly annoyed. This wasn't her office. It wasn't even technically her cafe, not yet. Once they were out of earshot, Ava turned and crossed her arms. "Sterling doesn't do this," she said tightly. "He doesn't get involved in personal projects. He doesn't buy buildings for anyone. And he definitely doesn't cancel quarterly meetings to take women to art galleries and shut down restaurants." Lena stayed silent, her hands resting against the edge of the countertop behind her. "I don't know what kind of story you've spun," Ava continued, "but I'm here to make sure it ends before it becomes a liability. You think I'm a threat to him. I think you're a distraction he can't afford." Lena met her gaze evenly. "Funny. He didn't seem distracted when he was investing in my future." Ava's jaw tightened. "He has responsibilities, investors, global operations. He's not some fairy tale prince. I never asked him to be." "Whatever you believe is happening here," Ava said coldly. "It's temporary. And I'm going to make sure it stays that way." Before Lena could respond, Ava turned and walked out, her heels echoing back through the narrow hallway like gunshots. Lena stood there, heart pounding, unsure if she wanted to scream or cry. She chose neither. Instead, she walked back to the counter, tied her apron tighter, and got back to work. That night, she didn't wait for Sterling to show up. She went to him. She didn't call. She didn't text. She took the subway uptown, walked the last few blocks to the tower, and told the concierge she was there for Sterling Callahan. The man made a call, nodded once, and then escorted her into the elevator. When the doors opened into the penthouse, Sterling was standing near the kitchen island, sleeves rolled up, a laptop open in front of him. He looked up, and when he saw her, his expression changed instantly. "Lena," he said, moving toward her. "Is everything okay?" She stepped inside, letting the doors shut behind her. "Your partner came to the cafe today." He froze. "Ava," she wanted to make sure I understood my place, and to remind me that you don't do things like this for people like me. His face darkened. "She had no right. She thinks I'm a problem, a mistake you'll regret. Then she doesn't know me as well as she thinks she does." Lena walked toward the windows, her fingers curling into fists. "I didn't sign up for this, Sterling. To be a blip in your life that your advisors want to erase. You're not a blip. Then tell me what I am." He crossed the room, stopping just inches from her. "You're the only person who's looked at me in weeks and asked nothing in return. You're the only thing I've thought about since the night I met you." She met his gaze, voice steady. "Then prove it." His brows lifted slightly. "How? Tell them, whoever needs to hear it. Tell Ava, tell your board. Tell your world that I'm not a liability." He stepped back, as if considering how deep the drop would be. "I've spent years keeping my life controlled," he said. "No chaos, no complications. No vulnerabilities. Then why start now?" His eyes found hers again, and something raw passed between them. "Because I've never wanted anything the way I want this." That night, he didn't take her to a restaurant or a gallery. He took her home, not to the penthouse, to where he grew up. The car drove them over a bridge, into a quiet neighborhood where the buildings were older and the sidewalks cracked. He led her up the steps of a weathered brownstone, the door creaking as he pushed it open. Inside, the walls were lined with photographs. A kitchen that looked like it hadn't changed in 2 decades, a hallway that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old books. "I bought this place back after my mother passed," he said softly. I couldn't bring myself to sell it. Lena walked through the space slowly, taking it in. A childhood room with old posters still tacked to the walls, a dented piano missing a few keys, a faded quilt on the couch. "Why bring me here?" she asked. "Because this is the part of me no one sees, the part I don't show in boardrooms or investor calls. And if you're going to be in my life, I want you to know all of it." She turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're not what I expected. You said that once before." "I meant it more this time." He stepped closer. "Do you still want to walk away?" "I don't know. But I know I can't pretend like this doesn't matter." He reached for her slowly, like offering something fragile. "Then don't pretend. Just stay." And this time, when he kissed her, it wasn't in a gallery or under chandeliers. It was in the creaky hallway of his childhood home, with the past wrapped around them and the future waiting just beyond the front door. The air was crisp and clear as Lena stepped out of the brownstone the next morning, her hand still tingling from where Sterling had held it the night before. The street was quiet, sun brushing across slanted rooftops, and for a moment it felt like the world had paused, like everything was suspended in that fragile space between what had already happened and what might come next. Sterling locked the door behind them and glanced over. "Hungry, starving," she admitted. They walked to a corner diner he remembered from his childhood. No reservations, no linen napkins, just a chipped countertop and coffee poured straight out of a steel pot that never seemed to empty. He ordered them both scrambled eggs and toast without asking, as if he'd already memorized how she took her breakfast. "You're quiet," he said, watching her stir cream into her coffee. "I'm thinking," she replied. He leaned in. "About whether this is real. Whether any of it will still be true when the dust settles." Sterling didn't look away. "I'm not going anywhere, Lena, but I know standing next to me means being seen, judged. I can't promise it'll be easy." "I don't need easy," she said. "I just need honest." He nodded slowly, like he understood the weight of what she wasn't saying. They ate in silence for a while. Then, as he reached for the check, a man in a suit stepped through the door, eyes scanning the room before locking on Sterling. "Mr. Callahan," the man said with a hint of urgency. "We need you back at the office. There's an issue with the Soul expansion." Sterling stood reluctantly, then turned to Lena. "Come with me. To your office. I want you to see the other side of my life. You've seen where I came from. Now I want you to see what I built." She hesitated, then nodded. The car ride downtown was swift, the tone inside the vehicle serious but not tense. Sterling took a few calls, issued sharp instructions in a language Lena didn't recognize, then hung up and placed his hand over hers without saying a word. She didn't pull away. When they arrived at the Callahan Enterprises headquarters, she was ushered through a private entrance. The building was stark steel and glass, but the inside buzzed like a living organism, people in motion, ideas sparking midair, the hum of a company that never slept. Sterling didn't slow down, but he didn't let go of her either. They took an elevator to the top floor, stepped into a suite that looked more like a command center than an office. Screens lined the walls, people moved across the space with practiced precision, and a digital map glowed behind his desk. But as soon as Sterling stepped inside, everything stopped. He turned to Lena. "This is where I spend most of my days. It's not always glamorous, it's a lot of pressure, but every decision I make here, it affects people, thousands of them. I wanted you to see that." She walked to the window, taking in the city from a perspective she'd never seen before. "It's a long way from the cafe. That's why I need someone who keeps me grounded." A knock interrupted them. Ava stepped in, her tone clipped. "The Soul team is ready." Sterling gestured for her to begin. For the next hour, Lena sat quietly in the corner watching him work. He was commanding but not cruel, decisive but open-minded. He listened, questioned, redirected. There was no arrogance in the way he ran the room, just certainty. When the meeting ended, Ava stayed behind. "This isn't sustainable," she said, glancing at Lena. "Investors are already asking questions." Sterling didn't flinch. "Then give them answers. She doesn't belong in this world. She belongs wherever I say she does," he replied calmly. And if that's a problem for anyone, they can take it up with me. Lena stood. I don't need defending. I know, Sterling said, his voice softer now, but I'm not letting anyone treat you like you're temporary. Ava said nothing more. She turned and left, heels silent against the carpet. Sterling turned to Lena. Come with me. They left the building through a side exit, walked 2 blocks until they reached a quiet park tucked between high rises. He led her to a bench, sat beside her, and exhaled. I bought the building because I believed in your dream, he said, but I didn't ask if you wanted my help. That was wrong. She didn't speak. I don't want to take anything from you, he continued. I want to build something with you, but only if that's what you want. Lena turned to face him fully. I don't want to be rescued. I don't want a fairy tale. I want you, all of you, the flawed parts. The complicated ones. Then say yes. To what? To the build, the cafe, the life, all of it. She hesitated. What if it doesn't work? Then we fail together. But I'd rather fail with you than succeed without you. She looked down at her hands, then back up at him. Then yes. He smiled then, not wide or showy, just a quiet curve of relief, like the breath he'd been holding for days had finally escaped. 2 weeks later, the cafe closed for renovations. Sterling didn't just fund the project, he worked beside her, helping choose tiles, testing paint samples, even tasting cakes from vendors until they found the perfect one. The night before the grand reopening, he stood in the middle of the newly remodeled space, surrounded by soft lighting and polished wood, and pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. I was going to wait, he said, but I don't want to. Lena stared at it, stunned. I fell for you the moment you handed over that envelope, he said. I just didn't know what to do with it yet. She opened the box. Inside was a simple gold ring with a single diamond, delicate and timeless. I don't care if we get married next week or next year, he added. But I want to start forever now. Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. Instead, she reached for his hand, steady as ever. You already have. They didn't need fireworks. They didn't need headlines. Just one another, and the knowledge that what had started with a forgotten envelope had become something permanent. The next morning, as the cafe doors opened and the first customers trickled in, Lena stood behind the counter, her counter now, and poured the very first cup of coffee. Sterling stood by the window, watching her with the quiet certainty of a man who'd finally found home. The scent of fresh espresso and vanilla bean lingered in the air as a soft breeze filtered through the open glass doors of the cafe. Lena stood at the back of the space, adjusting a framed black and white photograph of the original brew, and rise her quiet tribute to the journey that brought her here. The walls were now warm with rich cedar tones, and each table bore a hand-picked ceramic vase with a single white lily. Every detail had her fingerprints on it, from the reclaimed wood counter to the copper sconces that cast a golden glow over the cafe at dusk. Looks like you finally built your dream, said a voice behind her. She turned to find her younger brother, Caleb, stepping inside with a wide-eyed grin. He wore his usual paint-splattered jeans and a camera slung over his shoulder like always. He hadn't seen the space since construction finished. It's more than I imagined, Lena said. But yeah. I did. Caleb stepped further in, snapping a few candid shots of the cafe as the early evening light spilled across the polished floor. And the guy who helped make it happen, is he still around, or did he vanish into a boardroom again? Lena gave him a look. He's upstairs, fixing a bookshelf he tried to assemble without reading the instructions. Caleb laughed, then paused. You're happy? I am, he nodded. Then that's all I need to know. Sterling appeared at the top of the staircase a moment later, his sleeves rolled up and a pencil behind one ear. I need a second set of hands unless you want books raining down on your customers tomorrow. Lena raised a brow. You sure you want me handling power tools after what happened to the cabinet? That was one time. She kissed Caleb's cheek and made her way up the stairs, where Sterling stood beside a half-assembled shelf that was leaning at a precarious angle. He offered her a screwdriver like a peace offering. I think it's safe to say engineering is not your calling, she teased. He took her hand, guiding her toward the opposite end of the room. Come here. I need your opinion on something. The upstairs reading loft overlooked the cafe below, a cozy sanctuary filled with overstuffed armchairs and shelves lined with rare first editions he'd collected quietly over the years. In the corner, a small table stood beneath a pendant light, an envelope resting on top. What's that? She asked. I had it written last week. Sterling picked it up and handed it to her. She opened it carefully. Inside was a legal document transferring full ownership of Brew and Rise to her. No liens, no conditions, no clauses tucked in fine print. Lena stared at him. I already told you I don't need this. I know, he said, but I need you to have it completely, no strings. I want you to know that you own your dream. I just had the privilege of watching you build it. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around his waist, resting her head against his chest. You're going to ruin every man for me. Good, he murmured into her hair. That's the plan. They finished the bookshelf together, uneven, slightly crooked, but proudly theirs. As they descended the stairs, the cafe below had filled with soft chatter. Friends, locals, and a few curious newcomers lingered near the pastry case, admiring the delicate confections and curated tea blends. A violinist played softly in the corner, the music adding a romantic hush to the room. Sterling took Lena's hand as they walked toward the center. Caleb tapped the mic he'd set up near the stage. Everyone, if I can steal your attention for a second, he said. I want to raise a glass to someone who turned a small corner cafe into a place that feels like home. Everyone raised their cups. To Lena, Caleb said. Who built something beautiful. To Lena, the room echoed, voices warm and sincere. Sterling leaned close to her ear. You're going to want to step outside. She gave him a questioning look but followed him through the front doors. The street outside had transformed. String lights stretched across the block, flickering gently in the dusk. A small crowd had gathered, neighbors, friends, and even a few familiar faces from the old cafe days. A jazz trio played from the flatbed of a vintage truck parked at the curb, and a chalkboard sign read, Brew and Rise. Grand reopening celebration, love served daily. Lena turned to Sterling, stunned. You did this? I figured your first night deserved a little extra magic. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a second box, this one smaller than the ring box, wrapped in navy blue velvet. She opened it to find a delicate key hanging from a thin gold chain. This is the original key to the cafe, he said. I had it cast in gold. You gave me something priceless when you let me in. I wanted to give it back in a way that lasts. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Say you'll keep letting me stand beside you, in this life, in your world. Every day. She reached up and fastened the necklace around her neck, the key resting just above her heart. Then let's make a life, she said. One where you're not just watching me build, one where we build together. He kissed her then, right beneath the lights, in front of the crowd, the music, and the sweet hum of a city that finally felt like theirs. Months passed and fall melted into winter. Sterling adjusted his schedule, spending fewer hours in glass towers and more beside her. They traveled briefly Paris for inspiration, Kyoto for tea blends, and back to Brooklyn in time to hang snowflake garlands across the cafe windows. The business thrived beyond their expectations, but they never let it grow too fast. They kept it personal, intimate. The kind of place where people felt seen. On a quiet Wednesday, just after the early lunch rush, Sterling walked into the cafe holding a rolled parchment tied in silk ribbon. Lena glanced up from the register. What's that, Elise? He said, unrolling it on the counter. For the space next door. She looked at it, then at him. A second location, she asked. A bakery, he corrected. Yours, you mentioned wanting to create a space just for pastries. I thought we could start planning. She bit her lip, overwhelmed. You still believe in every version of me, don't you? I always will. They signed the lease together, the pen trembling slightly in her hand. And that spring, beneath blooming cherry blossoms in the park where he first showed her both worlds, They stood surrounded by friends and exchanged vows. Not in a ball gown, not in a tuxedo. Just the two of them in linen and lace, laughing through tears as they promised to hold steady through storms and sun. As the guests clapped and petals floated on the breeze, Sterling leaned down and whispered, "You changed everything for me." Lena smiled, tears sparkling. "You made room for me to change everything for myself." Later that night, as they returned to the cafe after the celebration, the lights flickered softly inside. The staff had left behind a note on the chalkboard, closed for one day. But love. Always open. They stepped inside, locked the door behind them, and danced barefoot in the empty space. No music. No crowd. Just their laughter echoing off the walls and the certainty that they had built something eternal. And in the quiet that followed, as the city hushed and the stars blinked into place, Sterling held her close and whispered, "Home." Lena looked up at him, her heart full, always.